The ocean waves crashed against the shore, carrying the scent of salt and freedom. The human stood barefoot in the sand, his muscles still trembling from the long journey through the storm. He had been thrown across space when his ship was damaged, and fate left him stranded on this strange world. He thought he was alone until he felt dozens of eyes watching him. From the edge of the jungle, figures began to appear. They stepped into the light of the sun, their skin green and gleaming as if polished by nature itself. Their bodies were tall, athletic, and beautiful, yet their movements carried the precision of warriors. Each wore leather straps and carved jewelry, and in their glowing eyes burned something between hunger and wonder. The man realized with shock that they were all women. For a moment, silence ruled the beach. The women stared at him as though he was a spirit pulled from their myths. Some gasped, others whispered in a language he could not understand. Their voices carried a strange rhythm, and their hands trembled as if the sight before them was impossible. Then one stepped forward, her silver-white hair falling over her shoulders. She was young, her face smooth and striking, yet her gaze was sharp as steel. She spoke, her voice low but filled with command, and the others answered her with cheers. The man did not know their words, but he understood their meaning. They had not seen one like him in a very long time. Their expressions shifted from awe to something else, something dangerous. It was as though centuries of longing and fear had awakened all at once. He stepped back, his instincts warning him. The silver-haired leader pointed at him, and her warriors spread around like a circle closing on prey. The human clenched his fists, his body still sore from survival but his spirit unbroken. He had fought beasts on wild planets, but never had he faced an army of beautiful strangers who seemed ready to tear him apart. Their leader spoke again, her words echoing like a judgment. The tone was not cruel but hungry, almost desperate. The man caught fragments, his ears slowly catching the rhythm of their speech. One word repeated over and over, shouted by the women as if it was both a demand and a prayer. He understood then they were calling him male. It struck him like thunder. These women, this tribe, had not seen a man for over 100 years. He felt their stares pressing against his skin, their steps heavy as they moved closer, their breathing quickened with excitement. Some reached out their hands as though they wished to touch him, to prove he was real. Their eyes glowed not only with desire but also with a dangerous edge, as if they might consume him the way starving wolves consume meat. The man raised his voice for the first time, trying to calm them, but his words carried no meaning to their ears. His voice only seemed to stir them further. The crowd murmured and surged, their hunger growing. He could see their muscles tense, their lips curl into strange smiles, their hands gripping spears that trembled not with fear, but with longing. The silver-haired leader stepped closer, her eyes locking on his, unblinking. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to still. She lifted her hand and gently brushed the air near his face, stopping just short of touching him. Her lips parted as though she could not believe her own sight. Behind her, the tribe erupted in chants that shook the sand beneath his feet. The human's chest tightened as the truth settled deep inside him. He was not a guest here. He was not even a prisoner. To them, he was something greater and more dangerous. After 105 years without seeing a man, these women did not just want him. They needed him. And if he failed to stand strong, they might devour him before the sun set. The circle around him tightened, the sand crunching under dozens of bare feet. The human could hear their breaths now, heavy and uneven like a tide ready to swallow him whole. His eyes scanned their faces, beautiful, fierce, and yet filled with something he had rarely seen in soldiers or predators. It was a hunger that went deeper than the body. It was a hunger born of years, maybe centuries, of emptiness. He clenched the wooden club he had carried since the wreck. It was little more than driftwood carved into a crude weapon, but it had saved his life before. The women eyed it with curiosity, some laughing softly as if amused that he thought he could defend himself against so many. The leader with silver hair stepped forward again. She lifted her hands to silence the others. Her movements were elegant, her posture straight, but her eyes never left his. She spoke words he did not know, yet her tone carried weight like the voice of someone born to command. The crowd quieted at once, but their gazes still burned into him. Then she did something unexpected. She lowered her weapon and touched her own chest, right above her heart. She said a word slowly, clearly, as though teaching a child. The human repeated it, unsure, and the women around them gasped as if lightning had struck. She touched her chest again, spoke her name, then pointed at him. He understood. She wanted his name. His voice came out rough from days of survival, but he gave it. The sound of it spread through the circle like fire through dry grass. They repeated it again and again, chanting as if it was some sacred word. For a moment he felt less like prey and more like a symbol. Yet he could not relax. The way their hands trembled, the way their eyes shone, it was worship mixed with madness. Suddenly one of the younger warriors could not hold herself back. She broke from the circle and rushed at him, her green skin glowing in the sunlight, her eyes wide. He raised his club, expecting an attack, but instead she dropped to her knees in front of him. She touched his leg with shaking fingers as if confirming he was flesh and not illusion. Her lips moved, whispering the word male over and over. The leader barked something sharp and two others pulled the girl away. Yet even as they dragged her back, she wept and cried out his name. The sound made the tribe restless again, their voices rising like thunder. The human's heart pounded. He knew then that this was not a simple meeting of strangers. This was the edge of something greater, something dangerous. The women were not only curious about him, they were desperate. Their bodies shook with need, their minds clouded with obsession. If order broke, they might throw themselves on him, and no strength of his could stop them all. The leader seemed to understand this too. She raised her arms high, shouting commands until the crowd calmed, though not fully. Then she looked at him again, her eyes softer now, almost pleading. She gestured toward the jungle behind her, then back to him. The meaning was clear. They wanted him to come with them. His instincts screamed to run, but where could he go? The ocean stretched endless on one side, the wild unknown of the jungle on the other. He had no allies, no ship, no way home. And here stood a tribe of women who might both worship and destroy him. He tightened his grip on the club, his jaw set. He had survived worse odds. He had stood against storms, beasts, and soldiers with no mercy. But this was different. He was not just fighting for survival. He was standing in the middle of a story written long before he arrived. The leader waited for his answer, her silver hair glowing like fire under the sun. Behind her, the tribe leaned forward, their eyes hungry for his choice. He exhaled slowly. Whatever awaited him in that jungle, he would face it, and he would not face it as prey. He would face it as human. The jungle swallowed him whole as he followed the tribe. The sound of waves faded, replaced by the calls of strange birds and the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. Thick vines draped from towering trees, their leaves glowing faintly in the sunlight that slipped through the canopy. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and flowers, strange and sweet, yet carrying a weight that reminded him this world was alive in ways he did not yet understand. The women moved swiftly, their steps silent despite their numbers. They seemed at home here, like hunters who owned every path, every shadow. The human kept his grip tight on his club, though he knew it was a poor defense if they chose to strike. Still, their leader's presence kept them disciplined. The silver-haired woman walked at the front, glancing back at him often, her gaze sharp but not hostile. She was more than a warrior. She was someone who carried the burden of her people. He noticed how the tribe looked at him even as they moved. Some whispered, unable to take their eyes away from him. Others smiled with awe, their lips trembling as if they were on the edge of tears. It was as though his very existence filled a hole that had ached in them for generations. Finally, the path opened into a vast clearing. At its center rose stone structures worn with time but still standing proud. Fires burned in carved bowls, smoke curling into the sky. Around them, dozens more women appeared. Young and old, all green-skinned, their eyes glowing when they saw him. Gasps and shouts rippled through the crowd like a wave. Some dropped to their knees at once. Others stretched their hands toward him as if trying to catch his light. He felt the weight of hundreds of stares. His chest tightened. This was no ordinary meeting. This was a return. To them, he was the answer to a silence that had lasted more than a century. The leader raised her hands, commanding order. The voices fell, leaving only the crackle of fire and the pounding of his own heart. She spoke to her people, her words ringing with strength and reverence. The crowd listened with devotion, their eyes shifting between her and him. He could not understand her speech, but he felt the meaning in his bones. She was declaring something important. Perhaps his arrival was not just chance, but destiny. The human scanned the crowd and saw older women watching him with tears streaming down their cheeks. Their hands clasped as though in prayer. Younger ones leaned forward, trembling with energy, their gazes filled with hunger and hope. It was overwhelming. and for the first time since he landed he feared not for his life but for what he represented. Then came the drums. Women stepped forward, beating hollowed logs, filling the air with deep thunder. The rhythm shook the ground, steady and commanding. The leader walked closer to him, her silver hair catching the firelight, her green skin shining with sweat and dust. She reached out again, but this time her hand rested gently on his chest. Her touch was firm, steady, as if claiming him in front of all. The crowd erupted, their voices rising into chants. His name, once strange to their tongues, now rolled like thunder across the clearing. He was no longer just a man to them. He was a symbol of renewal, a promise that their suffering would end. But in that moment, as he looked into the eyes of the leader, he saw something else. Behind her strength, behind her reverence, was fear. She was not just celebrating his arrival. She was warning him. He realized then that this tribe's hunger was not simple. It was bound by law, by tradition, by something older than their chance. And if he failed to understand it, their desperation might consume him before he learned why fate had brought him here. The fire crackled. The drums pounded. The tribe's voices roared like a storm. And deep inside, the human prepared himself for what was coming. The night came quickly over the jungle, covering the clearing in shadows broken only by firelight. The tribe had gathered in a wide circle, their faces glowing with orange light, their voices low and steady as they chanted words older than memory. The human sat on a carved stone near the center, the silver-haired leader standing beside him. Her hand rested lightly on his shoulder, not in comfort but in control, as if to remind her people that he was hers to guide. The air felt heavy with expectation. He could feel it pressing down on him, the weight of hundreds of eyes. He had been in battles before, standing against armies, but never had silence felt like this, sharp and filled with hunger. At last, the leader raised her hands, and the chanting stopped. She spoke slowly, her voice carrying across the fire. Though he could not understand her words, he heard the power in them. The crowd listened as though each syllable was law. Then she turned to him and touched her chest again, repeating her name with pride. She pointed to him, urging him to speak. He gave his name once more. The crowd repeated it like thunder, shaking the night. Then the leader lowered her head toward him in a gesture that felt ceremonial. She drew a line across the air with her hand, then tapped her heart, her lips, and her forehead. The people followed. The human frowned, trying to piece it together. This was not just a ritual of welcome. It was a bond, a declaration. They were binding him to something, whether he agreed or not. Then came the elders. 3 women, their hair white as bone, stepped forward with staffs carved from dark wood. Their skin was wrinkled but strong, their eyes burning brighter than the flames. They moved closer, circling him, their voices rising in unison. They touched the ground with their staffs, each strike echoing like thunder. He stiffened, gripping his club, but the leader placed her hand on his wrist and shook her head. He forced himself to stay still. The eldest leaned close, her voice trembling yet powerful as she spoke words he could almost feel more than hear. She touched his face with her hand, her fingers cool and trembling. She whispered the word male, her voice breaking, tears shining in her eyes. Then she turned to the crowd and shouted. The clearing exploded with voices, cries that shook the night sky. The human's heart pounded. This was no meeting, no accident. His arrival had been foretold, perhaps even prayed for. The tribe had lived for generations without men, and now one stood before them. To them, it was not coincidence. It was destiny. But as the crowd roared, he noticed again the fear in the leader's eyes. She kept glancing at him, then at the elders, as though uncertain whether this was a blessing or a curse. The drums returned, beating faster now, wild and furious. Young warriors danced around the fire, their bodies moving with sharp precision, their chants growing louder. The energy was no longer only joy, it was hunger unleashed. Some of the women's eyes glowed brighter, their breaths faster, their movements restless, as if they could barely control themselves. The leader stepped forward, raising her staff and shouting a command. The circle froze. The crowd's voices died down, though their eyes still burned with longing. She pointed toward a stone arch at the edge of the clearing, carved with strange symbols that shimmered faintly in the firelight. Then she looked at him. It was clear. She wanted him to walk through it. He rose slowly, his legs tense, his mind racing. Whatever lay beyond that arch was not simple. It was the heart of their secret, the truth behind their hunger, and perhaps the reason they had nearly devoured him on sight. As he walked toward the stone, the crowd began to chant again, low and trembling like a storm building on the horizon. The leader followed close behind, her silver hair catching the glow of fire, her eyes unblinking. The human stepped beneath the arch, the carvings glowing brighter as his shadow touched them. The jungle around him seemed to fall silent, as though even the night itself held its breath, and in that silence he knew, whatever law bound these women, he was now part of it. The carvings on the stone arch glowed faintly as he passed beneath it, their light shimmering like embers from a dying fire. The human paused, feeling a strange vibration ripple through his chest. It was not pain, but something older, deeper, as though the stone itself recognized him. Behind him, the chants of the tribe grew louder, echoing like thunder against the trees. The silver-haired leader walked at his side, her hand brushing against his arm to steady him. Her face remained calm, but her eyes betrayed her, shining not only with power but with unease. She guided him deeper into the sacred ground, where the air grew cooler, the firelight replaced by a soft glow from moss that covered the walls of a half-buried temple. Inside, the elders waited. They stood before a massive stone tablet carved with ancient symbols, worn by time but still alive with meaning. The leader bowed her head to them, then motioned for him to step forward. He hesitated, his grip tightening on his crude weapon. The silence here was heavier than any he had felt. One elder raised her staff and struck the ground 3 times. The sound echoed like the toll of a bell. She began to speak in a language thick with age, her voice low and trembling. The other elders joined her, their words weaving together until the chamber itself seemed to hum. The leader translated slowly, her words broken but enough for him to understand. 105 years, she said carefully, her voice echoing in the chamber. Since last male, he was last of blood. She touched her chest, then spread her hands wide to gesture at the carvings. Without male, tribe weaken. Children born, less and less, soon, none. The human's eyes narrowed. It was not only hunger or longing that had driven them, it was survival. Their people had been fading for more than a century, waiting for something that never came. His arrival was not only shocking, it was salvation. The leader's eyes glistened as she spoke again. Old law say, if male return he is, claimed he belongs to tribe. She lowered her gaze for a moment before looking up again, her voice steady but her hand trembling on her staff. If he refuse, tribe take him. The meaning was sharp and clear. His presence was no choice of his own. Either he accepted their law or risked being consumed by it. The human felt the air grow heavier around him, as the tribe's chants outside grew louder, echoing through the stone. His fist tightened, his jaw clenched. He had never belonged to anyone, not even in the armies he once served. He had fought for survival, for freedom, for his own will, and now a people he barely knew wanted to chain him to their destiny. The leader stepped closer, her eyes searching his. She did not speak, but her expression carried a message clearer than words. She was torn. She needed him as much as her people did, but she feared what would happen if the law consumed them all. The human exhaled slowly, his breath shaking the silence. He looked at the elders, their faces hard with faith, their eyes unblinking. He looked at the leader, her silver hair catching the faint glow of the moss, her lips pressed tight with unspoken fear. He spoke then, his voice steady, his words foreign to their ears but sharp with intent. I am not prey. The leader blinked, then translated softly. The elders frowned, whispering among themselves. The crowd outside roared louder, their chants vibrating through the ground, their hunger echoing in every beat. The leader touched his arm again, her fingers tightening as if to anchor him. She whispered one word, her voice cracking, choose. In that moment he knew his next step would shape not only his fate, but the future of the tribe itself. The word choose echoed in his head, long after the leader whispered it. The chants outside grew louder, shaking the stone walls of the temple. The human looked around, his body tense, his mind racing. He had faced armies before, but this was different. This was not a fight of blades and blood. It was a fight for his freedom against a law older than memory. The elders raised their staffs again, their voices rumbling with the weight of ritual. The leader translated as best she could, her words slow and broken. Law say, male must bind to tribe. If he not bind tribe, we'll bind him. Her eyes flickered with something deeper than fear. Regret. The human's jaw tightened. He stood tall, his shadow stretching against the glowing moss. His voice broke the silence, rough but firm. "I will not be a prisoner." The words meant little to them, but the tone carried power. The leader hesitated, then repeated his message to the elders. Their reaction was sharp. Gasps echoed in the chamber, the elder women shouting in anger, their staffs striking the stone floor. Sparks of light flared from the carvings, glowing brighter, as if the law itself had been defied. Outside, the crowd grew restless, their chanting turning into a roar. The leader raised her hands, shouting for silence. Slowly, the fury softened, but tension still hung heavy in the air. She turned back to him, her voice quieter now, almost pleading. "If you not accept, they take you, they devour you." Her words were clear this time. The hunger he had seen in their eyes was not just a figure of speech. The law demanded obedience, and if he resisted, the tribe would break into madness. He took a step forward, closer to the stone tablet, running his fingers over the ancient carvings. They pulsed faintly at his touch, as if the stone recognized him. His voice lowered, steady and unshaken. "If I must stay, then I choose how." The leader blinked, her lips parting. For a moment she said nothing. Then she turned to the elders and translated. The old women frowned, their voices harsh in reply, but one hesitated. Her eyes lingered on him with something like respect. She struck her staff once on the ground, silencing the others. The leader listened, then slowly looked back at him. "Elders say, if you prove strong, law can bend. Tribe respects strength. If you win, you not prisoner. You become more." The meaning sank deep into his bones. They would not take him by force if he proved himself. Strength was the only path they respected. His survival would depend not only on his will, but on his ability to show them he was more than a symbol. He had to show them he was human. The silver-haired leader stepped closer, her voice soft now, almost personal. "This way is dangerous. If you fail, tribe eat you." Her fingers brushed his arm again, lingering this time, her eyes searching his as though she feared the choice as much as he did. He met her gaze without flinching. "Then I will not fail." The leader inhaled sharply, then turned to the elders and shouted. The staff struck the ground, the carvings flared, and the chants outside shifted, rising in a new rhythm. The law had been challenged, and the tribe demanded proof. The human straightened, his heart steady despite the storm around him. He had walked into battles with no chance of victory before. He had lived when others thought death certain. And now, on this alien world, he would do it again. The leader lifted her staff high, the firelight dancing in her silver hair. Her voice rang through the chamber, calling the tribe to witness. The ground shook as the crowd outside roared in response. The trial had begun. The jungle clearing was alive with firelight when they led him out from the temple. The tribe had gathered in numbers greater than before. Hundreds of glowing eyes fixed on him, every face alight with hunger and anticipation. The drums thundered, each beat shaking his bones, each rhythm echoing with the promise of judgment. The leader walked beside him, her silver hair glimmering in the flames. Though her face was calm, her fingers brushed against his wrist for the briefest moment as if offering silent strength. She guided him to the center of a wide circle, marked with stones and painted symbols that glowed faintly in the firelight. It was an arena, a place built for trials. The elders stood at the far edge, staffs raised, their eyes unblinking. Their voices rose together, chanting the ancient law. The leader translated in fragments, her voice steady but low. "Prove. Strength, prove. You more than pray. If you win, tribe bow. If you lose, tribe feast." The human's jaw tightened. He had been tested before in deserts, on battlefields, in places where survival came only to those who refused to break. This was no different. Yet he could feel the heat of their hunger pressing on him. He was not just fighting for his life. He was fighting for control of his destiny. The first challenger stepped forward, a warrior tall and fierce, her green skin shining with sweat, her muscles carved from years of combat. She carried no spear, no blade, only her fists wrapped in leather. The crowd cheered her name, stomping the ground in rhythm. She bowed to the elders, then turned her eyes on him, smiling with sharp confidence. The human raised his crude club, but the leader shook her head. "No weapon," she said firmly. "Only strength." He dropped the club onto the sand. His fists clenched, scars pulling tight across his knuckles. He had fought with less before. The warrior lunged, her speed like lightning. She swung a heavy strike aimed for his chest. He shifted, the blow grazing past, and countered with a sharp elbow to her ribs. She staggered, surprised by his strength, but did not fall. The crowd roared. She came again, faster, striking with fists and knees. He blocked with his forearms, pain burning in his bones, but his body held. He had been broken before and risen again. Pain was nothing new. Waiting for his moment, he caught her wrist, twisted, and drove his shoulder into her chest. The force sent her sprawling across the sand. The crowd gasped, their chants faltering. The warrior groaned, struggling to rise, but when she did, she bowed her head toward him. The elders struck their staffs, accepting the outcome. The first trial was his, but it was not the last. Another warrior stepped forward, taller, stronger, her body covered in ritual scars that glowed faintly under the fire. Her eyes burned with fury, her voice a sharp cry as she challenged him. The crowd answered with thunderous cheers. The human's breath came heavy, sweat dripping down his brow. His muscles ached from the first fight, but his spirit only hardened. He lifted his fists again, stepping into the circle. The second warrior attacked with a ferocity greater than the first, her strikes wild but powerful. She drove him back step by step, her fists hammering like stones. The human gritted his teeth, his body screaming, but he refused to yield. When her arm came swinging wide, he ducked low, grabbed her waist, and lifted with every ounce of strength left in him. The crowd roared as he slammed her onto the sand, the impact echoing like thunder. She lay stunned, her breath knocked out, and at last bowed her head. The chants erupted again, louder this time, but now with something new. Respect. The leader's eyes met his across the circle. For the first time, she allowed herself a small, fierce smile. The law was bending, but the trial was not yet done. The elders lifted their staffs again, and the fire flared brighter. One final figure stepped forward, taller than all, cloaked in shadows, her presence heavy as stone. The crowd grew silent, their hunger turning into reverence. The human's heart pounded. This was no ordinary warrior. This was the true test. The final challenger stepped into the circle, and the atmosphere shifted. The crowd, which had roared like a storm moments before, fell into reverent silence. Even the drum stopped. The human's breath slowed as his eyes fixed on the figure approaching him. She was unlike the others, taller than any warrior he had seen, her skin darker, marked with glowing lines that pulsed faintly like molten fire under her flesh. Her hair was braided in thick coils that hung down her back, and her gaze was sharper than blades. The leader's voice trembled slightly as she translated. She is guardian of law, strongest of tribe. Last judge. Her silver eyes flicked to his, full of warning. If you win, tribe obey you. If you fall, tribe eat. The guardian lifted her arms, her fists wrapped in heavy leather, her stance calm and steady. She did not smile nor snarl, but simply looked at him as though weighing his soul. The human straightened, his chest rising with steady breaths. He had survived worse odds before, but never had so much depended on his strength. The elder women raised their staffs, striking the ground 3 times. The flames leapt higher. The crowd's chant began again, slow and deep, carrying the weight of generations. The guardian stepped forward. The human braced. Her first strike was faster than his eyes could follow. A fist slammed against his ribs, the pain exploding through his body. He staggered but kept his footing, blocking the second blow with his forearm. The force rattled his bones. She was stronger than the others by far. He countered, swinging hard, but she caught his fist mid-air, twisting his arm until fire shot through his shoulder. He roared, slamming his forehead against hers. The crack echoed, and though pain blurred his vision, she released him and stepped back, her eyes narrowing with respect. The crowd cried out, voices rising into wild shouts. The guardian circled him, her steps measured, her gaze never leaving his. He steadied himself, drawing on every scrap of endurance left in his scarred body. He had faced men who wanted him dead, beasts that wanted him broken. He could face her too. She lunged again, a blur of motion, but this time he was ready. He slipped to the side, his hand snapping out to seize her wrist. He twisted with all his strength, dragging her forward, and drove his knee into her stomach. The impact forced a grunt from her lips, but she did not fall. She swung her elbow into his jaw, sending him stumbling across the sand. Blood filled his mouth, his body screaming for rest, but the fire in his chest only grew hotter. He wiped the blood from his lips, spat into the dirt, and raised his fists again. His voice rang out, raw and powerful. I will not break. The words meant nothing to their ears, but the sound carried everything. The leader translated quickly, shouting it to the crowd. The chants changed, echoing his defiance. The guardian's expression shifted. For the first time, her lips curved into the ghost of a smile. She came at him once more, fists flying in a storm of strikes. He blocked, dodged, took blows that rattled his bones, but he refused to go down. At last he found his opening. As her fist came wide, he caught her arm, pulled her close, and twisted his body in a move born of desperation and instinct. With a roar, he threw her across his shoulder and slammed her into the sand. The impact shook the circle. Silence. The guardian lay still for a long moment, then slowly rose to her knees. She touched the ground with her fist, then bowed her head before him. The elders struck their staffs. The fire roared higher. The crowd exploded into a frenzy of cheers and screams, their voices echoing through the jungle like a storm. The human stood in the center, battered, bloodied, but unbroken. He had passed the final trial. The leader stepped beside him, her silver hair glowing in the firelight, her voice trembling as she translated for him. Now, you're not prisoner now. You are master of law. And for the first time, the tribe did not look at him with hunger. They looked at him with reverence. The firelight danced on the faces of the tribe as they chanted his name again and again. Their hunger had shifted into something heavier, devotion. The human stood in the center of the circle, his chest heaving, his body bruised and bloodied but unbroken. The guardian still knelt at his feet, her head bowed, and the elders raised their staffs high, their voices sharp as they declared him the master of law. He had won. Yet victory felt like chains wrapping tighter around him. The leader with silver hair stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on his arm. For a moment her eyes softened, though her words were heavy with meaning. Now, tribe belongs to you, but you also belong to tribe. Her translation cut deeper than any wound. The crowd's cheers grew louder, some women dropping to their knees, reaching toward him as though he was no longer a man but something sacred. Their faces were wet with tears, their voices trembling with joy. They had waited over a century for this moment, and now that it had come, they would not let it slip away. The human's thoughts churned. He had been a soldier, a survivor, a wanderer across countless worlds, but never had he been the center of a people's destiny. Freedom was his life's breath, yet here he stood wrapped in law older than himself. He clenched his fists, staring at the crowd, trying to steady the storm inside him. The elders stepped forward, circling him once more. One of them spoke, her voice cracked but steady, her hands trembling as she gestured to the sky. The leader translated. Law say, you must give tribe future. You must lead, protect, bring children. Her voice broke slightly as she added, if not, tribe die. The words sank like stone into his chest. He understood now why their hunger had burned so fiercely from the moment they saw him. It was not just desire, it was survival. Without him, their line would end. He was not simply master of law. He was the seed of their future. The crowd pressed closer, their voices pleading, their hands stretched toward him. The guardian rose, her tall figure towering above the others, but even she lowered her head in reverence. For the first time, he saw fear not in the leader's eyes, but in the guardian's. They were desperate enough to worship him, but desperate enough to consume him if he refused. The leader touched his chest, forcing his gaze back to her. You strong. You win now. You must decide. You save us, or you doom us. Her voice trembled, and for a heartbeat her mask of strength cracked. He could see the woman behind the commander, tired, burdened, afraid. He took a long breath, the night air burning in his lungs. Around him the chants rose again, their rhythm deep and trembling as though the jungle itself joined their cry. His eyes scanned the sea of green-skinned faces, glowing eyes shining with hope, hunger, and desperation. He was their savior, their prisoner, their future. The human's voice rang out deep and steady, though they could not understand his words. If I stay as myself, not as your tool, not as your prey. I will fight for you, but I will not be broken for you. The leader hesitated, her silver hair glowing in the firelight. She searched his face, then slowly nodded. She turned to the crowd, her voice carrying his message. The tribe listened, their cries softening into murmurs, then into silence. When she finished, the clearing felt different. The hunger had not vanished, but something else had taken root. Respect. The leader's voice softened as she whispered to him, almost too quiet for the others to hear. They see you now. Not just male. Not just law, they see human. The fire burned low, the drums slowed, and the night stretched long. Yet he knew the greatest trial was not the fight he had won. It was the choice that awaited him. The fires burned low as dawn crept over the jungle. Mist curled around the stone temple and the weary tribe, their chants finally fading into silence. Many of them slept where they had fallen, their bodies sprawled in the sand after a night of ritual and frenzy. Yet the human did not sleep. He stood alone at the edge of the clearing, watching the sun rise beyond the trees, his heart heavy with the choice before him. The leader approached quietly, her silver hair damp with dew, her eyes ringed with fatigue. She stopped a few steps from him, her voice soft. "They wait for you. Tribes see you as hope, but hope can bind as much as chains." He looked at her, his scars catching the pale light. "And what do you see?" he asked. For the first time, her lips curved into something fragile, almost a smile. "I see, man. Strong, stubborn, foolish, but alive. That is enough." They stood in silence, the weight of 100 years pressing between them. She had led her people through despair, clinging to fading laws, waiting for something that might never return. And now that he had come, the tribe expected him to be both savior and sacrifice. The elders gathered again as the sun rose higher, their staffs striking the ground. The tribe woke and surrounded the clearing once more, their glowing eyes fixed on him. The leader translated their words slowly. "It is time. You give your answer. You take law or refuse. If you take, tribe live. If you refuse, tribe die." The human's chest rose and fell with steady breaths. He thought of his years wandering worlds, fighting battles that were not his, surviving storms and wars with nothing but his will. He had always been free. Yet freedom had never meant being alone. Here, among these desperate faces, he saw not only hunger but also something he had not expected. Belief. He stepped forward, his voice strong, each word carrying the weight of his choice. "I will stay, but not as your prisoner, not as prey. I will fight beside you, teach you, and protect you. Together we will write a new law." The leader's eyes widened, her breath catching. She quickly translated, her voice shaking with emotion. The crowd erupted, their cheers shaking the ground, their voices crying out with joy. The elders frowned at first, but then one by one they lowered their staffs. The guardian stepped forward, towering above them all, and bowed her head to him. The leader turned back to him, her eyes glistening. "You change what cannot change. Tribe follow you now." He nodded, his expression hard but steady. "Then we start today, not as master and slaves, not as law and prey, but as people who want to live." The sun broke fully through the trees, casting golden light across the clearing. For the first time in 105 years, the tribe did not see only hunger when they looked at a man. They saw a future. The leader stood at his side, her silver hair glowing like fire in the morning light. She whispered, too soft for the others to hear. "You have given us more than life. You have given us hope." The human glanced at her, the faintest smile breaking his scarred face. "And you have given me something worth staying for." The crowd roared again, but he no longer heard it as a burden. He heard it as a beginning. For the first time since his ship had fallen from the sky, he did not feel like a stranger on this world. He felt like he belonged.